Yeah, hi. My name is Josh Haberman, based out of the Bay Area, San Francisco, as well as Sonoma Valley. I am a certified somm, been in the wine business for almost 3 decades. Started up in Sonoma Valley in the Carneros area, in the wine side, working at wineries and in the vineyards. And then I moved forward to really learn and further my global wine knowledge. So that's where I started studying to get all my certified sommelier diplomas.
Wow.
And so now I currently split my time in the city at the restaurants as a sommelier, which I still really enjoy. And going up to Sonoma to make some wine.
Let's go on some myths, right? Chilling red wine is a bad idea.
I would say that's false.
So there is no problem in chilling red wine, you think?
You know, for me, and what I try to promote to everyone, wine is a personal thing. And you know, the style of a wine, you could actually adjust the wine's flavor by temperature so that if someone enjoys very powerful, robust wines, they could have it at room temperature. And frankly, you know, a friend that might enjoy wines that aren't so aggressive and so complex and prefers something softer, you could actually chill it, and that will, as I like to call it, kind of numb the wine down a bit.
Usually value wines are not meant to be decanted. Is that true or false? Like usually I've seen that expensive wines are the ones which people decant, you know, so it's no point decanting Yellowtail or Jacob's Creek.
I'd say that's false. I could see certain wines that are, you know, would be considered low end. Because two things, I'd look at wines that might have high alcohol. I'd also look at closures. So if you're considering wines that have, you know, Stelvin or screw cap closures, you know, for me, some of those heavier wines, those benefit from a little decanting. And that could be simply pushing it through a decanter and right back into your glass.
So it's basically a good idea overall to just decant a little bit just to refresh the wine.
Yeah, it's personal. It's a personal thing. If I'm doing a very special, I do private events also. So if I'm hosting an event and I'm showing, you know, very select cult wines, you know, world famous old world Bordeaux or, you know, Burgundy, for example, there are definitely certain wines that you really need to decant. And I think a lot of that is more towards the age of the wine and whether or not the wine might be throwing sediment. So knowing if the producer is fining and filtering the wine or not. So those could all be reasons. I typically will recommend, if someone comes into my restaurant and they bring in a very young Cabernet from Napa, for example, that we would decant it, because that wine really just needs two things: some fresh air, some oxygen, right? And usually just needs to warm up.
Adding ice in your wine, you know, you should not add ice.
I don't put ice in wine. I typically don't use ice very often. Ice for me is really, it's useful more or less with liquids that have bubbles. Or of course, if it's a hot day, you want to keep something nice and chilled. My theory really is if you're going to drink something that you know doesn't taste very good, that you might not like, if you actually put ice in it, it's going to, you know, it's going to numb it down so you won't taste too much. So I always have this theory, if you're drinking a white wine that you don't like so much, you know, put a lot of ice cubes in it. But if you're drinking good quality white, you do not want that to be cold, because you want to really relish and pick up all those wonderful flavors that the wine has to offer. And so by chilling it, you're losing that.
What does a, you know, glassware do, which a normal, let's say if I was drinking wine in this versus a proper stained glass, you know, what difference is it making?
I mean, that in particular cup is great for heated liquids, right? Because it's going to absorb the heat for coffee or whatever. But with wine, you really, to me, the big thing is the bowl of the glass. So let's consider a Pinot Noir glass that has a big, what I call a belly bottom bowl, as opposed to a Bordeaux glass, which is more upright. So that can have something to do with aromatics and obviously the palate. It also, to me, the big part of it is the lip of the glass, and the way the lip is shaped will promote the way the liquid actually pushes off the glass onto your tongue. And so, you know, Riedel, which is a world famous glass company for wine, of course, used to do some wonderful seminars on that. And it would be fun because you compare and contrast the same exact wine side by side with 4 different types of glass, and the way they smell and taste can be considerably different. As far as plastic and glass, if you and I are just drinking a good glass of Pinot, it's I'm good to go either way. And sometimes you can look back, and I know I've done this, Sid, where I've looked back and I've had some memorable glasses of wine, in a parking lot in a Dixie cup.
True. Usually where the memories are made, like especially still like in parts of Europe, when you go to Spain or some local joints, right? Or Brazil and all some areas, the wine glass will be just like a tea, small sort of, same cup. Vodka comes into that, beer comes in that, then wine comes in the same glass. But yeah, it looks like it does make a difference for sure. What about food pairing? Red wine goes with red meat, white wine goes with white meat. Is that true or complete made up marketing thing?
I think there's just been a trend in history, but there's probably some marketing behind that. Again, working on restaurant floors, promoting classical wine service, and going back to my studies, pairing wine is that's a hard thing to do. But I try to keep it simple, and I try to keep it open-ended. So red wine with seafood, without a doubt. I think a lot of it has to do with the preparation of the protein, and then the type of sauces you might be using with that protein. So
I heard that on the previous judge, the same thing. So explain me, on a layman term, give me a pro tip here. If I'm just making this kind of sauce, or what's the rule of thumb on me using a food pairing and a wine pairing?
Classically, when we're dealing with steaks and red meats, heavier wines with tannins, higher alcohol, those all can play well. But I would say one thing across the board is important is having good acidity in the wine, right? Especially if you're trying to pair, for example, white wine with red meats. As long as that white wine has complexity and it's got acid, they tend to do very, very well, especially with a lot of Italian wines.
Just a couple of business questions. How do you approach, what's your spiel when you greet a guest at your restaurant?
My rule of thumb is really just having good eye contact and just communicating with them and just try to understand what they're looking for. I've always said this for many years now, especially if I do a staff training or something to that level, I'm trying to help the customer find what they're looking for. And sometimes at restaurants, they're not sure, especially if they don't drink a lot of wine, for example. So I really try to hone in on what they like, what they might have had recently that just blew their mind, and they just still, they'll never forget it. And then of course, you can talk about price points, but I typically do that by using my hand and pointing to different selections on our wine list. So really asking them just 2 or 3 questions, and you can really hone in. And by doing that, you're 90% sure that by the time you bring that wine to them, unless it's a flawed wine, they're going to love it.